Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby. With me is Brian Skerry, producer behind the amazing Disney Plus documentary, Secrets of the Whales. And Brian, you've actually been a photographer with National Geographic for, I think, over 20 years at this point. And this project is actually pretty unique because it's a mini series on Disney Plus, but you also are sort of attacking this in a multi-platform way with a cover story and a book as well with your photography. What sort of led to the decision to have this multi-platform approach with these whales?
Right. Well, it's a great question, Sam. And yeah, so when I sort of created the idea for Secrets of the Whales over the last decade, really, the last big whale project I did for National Geographic magazine was a story about the most endangered whale in the world, the North Atlantic right whale. And since that time, I had wanted to do a multi-species project, and I knew that there was potential narrative threads, but the challenge was connecting the dots. How would I, achieve a project that would be able to encompass multiple species under one sort of umbrella? I looked at a lot of things, but as I was talking to scientists and reading scientific publications in recent years, I noticed this theme of culture emerging. The fact that some of the latest and greatest science was revealing that whales, like humans, do things differently depending where in the world they live. And I'm talking about within a single genetic, identical species. So orca in one place were, preferring a certain ethnic food than their cousins in another place, but they're the same species, so much like humans. Or that they had different whales, sperm whales had different dialects, different languages, and so forth. So I proposed this project to multiple platforms within National Geographic because I realized that it was a potentially powerful story. The notion of seeing the ocean or our planet through the lens of culture with another species was something that was a bit different. I felt it could be a game changer. And also because, these platforms, of course, can do different things. The print mediums like the book and the magazine can achieve one thing, but motion picture, of course, does something very different. And with these whale families, we wanted to have sound. We wanted to show that they have song. It's the American Idol of the sea with humpback whales competing every year for a winning tune, or that the sperm whales had these dialects, which, if we've seen the movie Arrival with Amy Adams, this is what the whale scientists are trying to do. They're trying to crack that code. So, it was a very grand, ambitious project, and I pitched it to each of the various divisions, and fortunately they embraced it. And that, each of those was the greatest day of my life when it got greenlit. And then the next day you wake up and realize now we have to do it. So anyway, but that was sort of the origin.
Yeah. Well, I know there's tons of planning that has to go into these. It's a multi-year sort of commitment to film a documentary series like this. And so I'm curious what led you to focus on the whales that you did, because each of the four episodes is dedicated to a different species, be it sperm
Right.
whale or orca. What led to that?
Well, a part of it was my own interest in these animals. I had photographed and worked with most of those species at one point or another throughout my career. But it really came down to where I felt we had the greatest amount of science, because it all had to be based in science. It had to be built on a foundation of research that these were not just things that we were saying that, oh, they have culture or they have these ancestral traditions. It had to be provable. And we worked with researchers in each location. So that was part of it. And the other part of the strategy for me was to have species where we could see some of the different things. I mean, there's certainly commonality. The mom-calf relationship, for example, is very important in all of these species. But, we could focus on specific things. So with the sperm whales, for example, these are matrilineal societies. They're led by the older, wiser female. They do have these languages. They also have culture not only from a clan base with maybe 24 families in a location in the Eastern Caribbean near Dominica, but they're also at a family level, at a micro level, they're doing things differently. They're babysitting. The way they handle their own families are different. So those kinds of things were unique, let's say, to the sperm whales, as well as the dialects. We could focus on their language being unique. When I first heard about sperm whales, sort of not talking to each other if they have different dialects, I imagine the neighborhoods of New York at the turn of the 20th century, the Irish, the Italians, and all of these little enclaves. And that was really how I proceeded. With humpbacks, I wanted to focus on song. I wanted to focus on summer gatherings of old friends in Alaska where they come together to feed on herring. With the orca, it was, again, arguably the most intelligent animal in the ocean, but I really wanted to focus on feeding strategies. The fact that the orca in New Zealand like stingrays, and the ones in Patagonia like sea lion pups, or in the Norwegian Arctic, they like herring, and they've developed these unique strategies for doing those things. So, and the belugas was always sort of the future. It's been historically difficult to work in the Arctic for researchers or filmmakers because of the ice and the lack of infrastructure. But what little was known was that these animals have very rich cultures as well. So that was sort of a Hail Mary pass, if you will, that we would get enough material that we could make an episode, and it all worked out well. So those were some of the loose strategies and thinking of why I selected those species, and because I knew, based on talking to the researchers, that I could go to certain places and the potential for the visuals existed.
Yeah. And how much, if at all, did your understanding of the culture change, in the process? Did you discover any new things along the way that you weren't anticipating in terms of the story you were telling?
That's really an important point. I think it didn't change dramatically, but I was always pleasantly surprised to be able to see it. I had, as I said, worked with some of these animals in the past, but I often in the past looked at it somewhat clinically, from a distance, or, it was all about the photo. But here we were trying to tell a story about the families. So narrative was very important. So to be able to follow the specific whale families, in many cases, not every case, but in many cases, was very special to me. And to see socialization of these families, a sperm whale, for example, is a deep water animal. It spends most of its life hundreds of meters deep foraging for squid. But if you follow them long enough, you'll see every couple of days they come together as a family, and they reaffirm those family bonds. They rub together, they gently play and bite each other and close their eyes in bliss. So for me to see what I had been told by the researchers was reaffirming for me as well. And I think, I also, as a side note, I feel that there were no real surprises, but having done that for 3 years, constantly, and then coming to a full stop with the pandemic, I had a lot of time to think about it over the last year, my time with the whales. And I think I was reminded of things that I already know, that community matters, that family matters, that, life in the ocean is difficult for these animals as well as it is for humans, but they understand that they need each other, and that they rely on each other for simple joy or to function. And particularly juxtaposed against the pandemic, I think I was really struck by that.
Yeah, it's nice to see the animals have it figured out too, with
They
just the
do.
humans.
Yeah.
I talked to Brian Armstrong and Hayes Baxley recently, your Emmy nominated cinematographers, and they talked a lot about how the nature of documentary filmmaking, especially when you are after a living creature, is you kind of make a plan and then have to sort of get rid of it or alter it depending on what the whales are giving you. And you were out there on the boats with everyone. And so I'm wondering, what was your, favorite kind of spur of the moment memory or unexpected moment that happened with the whales?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I would echo what Hayes and Brian said, that, we had a very ambitious shot list here. And in my book, I actually talk about the Venn diagram of whale photography, and how if you overlap all of the circles of the things that have to happen, you end up with this tiny little bullseye. The sun has to be out, the whales have to be there, the water has to be clear, you have to get close. I don't have the luxury of using a 600 millimeter lens. I have to get very close to them, and they have to be doing something interesting. So all of those things were very ambitious. So in the end, I think we got everything we wanted, and some of these gems, as you just sort of described and alluded to. I would say there was memorable moments for each episode for sure, but some of the real special times would include the time with the orca in New Zealand. That was the shortest trip that we had. I mean, for me, I had just that particular year, that was 2019, I had already been in Sri Lanka and Dominica and the Azores and 6 weeks in the Canadian Arctic. I came home for about a day, repacked 15 cases of equipment, and then flew to New Zealand and only had 10 days, I think, in New Zealand, and then was going to go to the Cook Islands for humpback. So it was this hamster wheel whirlwind of year. And for 10 days to try to get that feeding behavior with the orca was difficult enough. To get it and then have this orca, drop that ray in front of me as an offering. I remember talking to Jim Cameron about that after, and he said, many cultures offer food, so it seems like that's what she was doing. And I felt pretty bad that I didn't eat a piece of it, but in any case, yeah, I think that and the sperm whale calf nursing, in Dominica in the Ocean Giant episode, to have a new mom that was so relaxed and trusting, allow me to free dive down 60 feet. And my assistant, Steve Deneve, who was shooting the video, to be able to get so close, she trusted us. And, so on many levels, that was extraordinary. It was great for the film, but it was great on a personal level too.
You are sort of, in a way, the human star of the series in the through line. Did you always intend for that to happen? You're kind of the camera's kind of following you on a journey there.
It's an interesting question. When we set out, when I originally pitched this to National Geographic Television, I wanted to do what I was going to do with the magazine story in the book, and that was just focus on the science and the whale culture. I felt that was a very important story. I think in the beginning, this sort of ebbed and flowed in the early days. It grew organically, but in the beginning, we looked at a certain amount of budget, and some of the thinking was that, well, one way to tell this story is to have focus on Brian's journey and as a character, as a photographer, a storyteller, and so forth. I agreed to that because I figured, well, okay, there might be some advantage or value to having that narrative, but I think we all agreed, Brian Armstrong, myself, that it was really about the whales. When the budget, was increased a bit, we were able to kind of go back to a more blue chipish kind of natural history, but there was still value, I think, in following me with the whales, because, I think for a lot of folks, let's say in the audience, to have that human guide is important than just to have some pure, narrating voice, as great as Sigourney Weaver's voice was, and it's brilliant. To also be able to see a human experiencing some of this stuff with an intent. It wasn't just, for pure gain of having somebody in the water. I was there doing my work as well. So yeah, I think that was always part of it. It sort of started small, grew bigger, and then we went back a little bit smaller, which was good.
Yeah. We talked a lot about whale culture, but I'm curious for a moment about human culture, because it seems like this takes 3 years, I think it was, to film all of it. And so much of it is just waiting, as you said, for the right circumstances, the right moment. And like, I know, I'm from Massachusetts, and I remember going on whale watches and not seeing anything, for certain times. And so that was disappointing for me, just for a short little excursion. What is the atmosphere like on those boats? Is it a constant sense of anticipation? What is the in-between time like?
Boy, yeah, it's so good. I'm from Massachusetts also. I just moved away 4 years ago to Maine here. So I feel your pain. I've been on those boats. I'll give you an example, Sam. I did 4 or 5 trips to Dominica over the time to work with sperm whales and Dr. Shane Garrow down there. And the first year I spent a month, and I came away with one good experience, one photo really. I went back the next year. I said, well, I'm going to go back for 5 weeks this time because I really feel that this is such an important part of it. The 5 weeks, the first 19 days, we didn't see a whale. 19 days. So we're going out on a small inflatable boat, reasonably small, open boat. You're getting baked by the sun. You're getting waves splashing over you. And every day you have to come back, wash down your equipment, go back home, make dinner in the rental house. And you just want to pull what hair I had left out of my head or beat it my head against the wall. It's so anxiety ridden. You want it so badly, you can taste it, but there's nothing you can do. And the worst part is, Shane, who's been working there for 15 years, says, well, this has never happened before. So not what you want to be hearing. So there is that constant sense of anticipation, and it could happen any moment. And you really have to find a way to motivate yourself, because you can't let your guard down. If I'm not ready, my camera's not prepped, or the video cameras aren't prepped, we're not going to get it, because sometimes these things happen briefly. So you have to maintain that. And the fortunate thing, I guess, is that I've done it long enough that I know that you can be in a place for, 2 months, and it comes down to the last day sometimes. So there's always that sort of knowing that it can happen anytime.
Yeah. Well, given that there's so much time and so much planning and work going into this, what was your reaction when you found out that there's 3 nominations for this series, including Outstanding Documentary Series?
Yeah, well, obviously, it's extremely satisfying. I was actually on Cape Cod when I got the news. I was in a gallery that we're releasing some of my new whale prints. And I was there all day signing books and meeting people. And I could hear my phone going off in my backpack, but I didn't answer it until about 7 p.m. that night. I looked at my phone, and there were these messages from folks at National Geographic and so forth. It's extremely satisfying. I think, an award like an Emmy Award or a nomination, of course, particularly for a documentary, a nature documentary, is a validation of sort. It's an acknowledgement that people understand and appreciate this work. For me, there was multiple levels of aspirations for this series. I obviously wanted it to be liked. I wanted people to enjoy it, to be entertained. I wanted people from all ages to like it. I wanted, somebody recently came over and asked me to sign their book, and said that they were having movie night with his 92-year-old mom, and they were watching Secrets of the Whales. And, I've gotten so many emails or letters from young children who like it as well. So it's got an age span. So that really appealed to me. At the end, I really wanted people to see culture, like I said, through the lens of culture. It isn't overtly a conservation film, but yet it can be a game changer in how humans perceive their planet and realize we're not alone. And there are these other animals out there with rich traditions as well. And maybe as a result, we will want to take care of the planet better. So an Emmy nomination is sort of the absolute icing on the cake. It is saying that people who look at films for a living, who understand the filmmaking process and storytelling process, appreciate this as well. So it's hard for me to articulate fully, but it's very satisfying on many levels.
Well, it's fantastic work. So thank you so much, Brian, for talking with me about this. We can't wait to see what whale or what other creature you document for us next. So,
all right. Well, thanks so much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. Everyone who's out there watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby. And Brian, thanks again.
All right. Thank you.